I discovered that at this time of night, my office turns into a yoga studio.
Before we start follow-up,
Yeah.
can I ask you a question about follow-up?
Yeah.
There's been some, feedback and comments going around that, we always start the podcast with this sort of follow-up and correcting mistakes and rediscussing things from the episode before. And some people like that, but other people have suggested that it's not the way to start the podcast. You do believe it is, and you're kind of the boss in a lot of ways. Why do you
Am
think
I the
this
boss?
is? Well, I don't know. I like you to think. I want you to think you're the boss.
Okay.
Why is this the best way to start the podcasts? Do you feel strongly about this?
I do feel strongly about follow-up first. Because if someone is listening to the podcasts in chronological order, it makes sense to do follow-up as the first section. Because if they're listening to a bunch of episodes in a row, when they finish episode 3, the start of episode 4 follows very naturally from what we were talking about in the previous one. So follow-up is obviously the next section. And when we started, when I was thinking about doing a podcast, I did think, maybe we'll record the follow-up first, because that's the thing that makes most sense to talk about kind of chronologically, and then just edit it so it's at the end, and then the main topic is in the beginning. But I don't think that works, because in all of our podcasts, when we do the main topic, we almost always reference something that was in the follow-up in the beginning. So I don't think you can say rearrange the conversation in post. I think follow-up has to be first, because like any conversation, you're going to refer back to it later on, which is exactly what we do.
I agree. I wasn't sure at the start, but I've become a real convert to it. I think there's a real culture in sort of media and broadcasting and anything to sort of, put your strong stuff at the start, and, don't bury the lead, and pull people in from the start and have a hook. I think podcasts are a different creature in that way. They are just like a chat, and I think it's okay. Like most chats, just start off meandering before they settle on a focus. And
and I if people enjoy the podcast, which I hope they do, if they're still listening at this point, what are we, 8 episodes in? I think this is number 8.
It is.
Presumably they're listening because they still like it, and I know, at least for the podcast that I listen to, it's very much, to me, it feels like I get to sit in on a conversation with people who I would not normally get to sit in on a conversation with. I like that feeling. And conversations, they have a particular flow, right? When you sit down with your friends, you catch up on what's happened since the last time you sat down together. You don't sit down at a table and think, right, what's my strongest opening story to tell my friends when I sit down? We're going to lead with a bang, and then later on we'll wrap up with the weather. But right now we got to lead with the main story. So that's not how friends talk to each other. And you and I are friends, and we're sitting down, so I think it's very natural for follow-up to come first.
All right. Let's do follow-up.
Okay.
What do you got from last time?
So I just had to make a reference. For people who have not been on the Reddit, you really should go. It's great. There's a lot of very good conversation on the Reddit. But unbelievably, last time when we put our podcast up, we made reference in the middle of that podcast to possibly somebody about to get on an airplane, who may have just downloaded that, and you were talking about plane crashes.
Yes, my obsession with them.
Yes. And I could not believe it. But when I put it up, the very first comment on the Reddit, mere minutes after uploading, someone said, and I took a little screenshot here. This guy, Thomas, said, "Yay! Excellent timing. I'm just about to board a plane," and was regretting the book I brought with me. Now I have 2 hours of the podcast to listen to, and then it finished with, "You guys are too good to me," right? Which was just like a very, very nice comment. But knowing that he was about to go into an episode where we discussed plane crashes for a not trivial amount of time, I just couldn't believe the coincidence that happened there, that the very first comment was exactly the thing that we were suggesting might occur. So anyway.
The best thing about that was, like, in the podcast, you made that joke too about someone on a plane listening to it, and then you spoke directly to them for a joke, and you said, "I hope you're enjoying this, Tim."
Right.
And that guy's name was Tom.
Right. So
it was so close to being wow.
Yeah, it would have been just perfect. But anyway, so fun things that happen on the Reddit. And again, I just want to say I think it's a really great community, and we were discussing before recording now that there's a lot of activity there, and it's great. And I really do look over the discussion. So anytime you want to talk about whatever we discuss on the podcast, the Reddit is a great place to go, and there will be a link in the show notes to whatever the link is for this episode. So I'll put that there.
Did we hear back from Tom after his flight?
Yeah, he was actually okay. We did not cause him a lot of anxiety, but when he landed on the other end, he said that he enjoyed it. And so I'm glad that we did not give him a panic attack on the flight, or you did not give him a panic attack on the flight, really. I would say that's mostly your fault.
Do you know what's amazing, Gray?
What?
Like, we're talking like, a week later, or however long it's been, and we're not really much closer to knowing what happened to that Malaysia Airlines plane.
Oh, yeah? See, you have to follow these things for me, so...
You must know what's going on, though. You're not that oblivious to the news, are you?
Well, this might actually be something we talk about later, but no. Last headline I saw was something about presumably a hijacking. Is that the current state of affairs?
Oh, we're nowhere near that.
Oh,
I don't think it was a hijacking. The latest is they seem to be having all this satellite imagery of possible debris, thousands of kilometres off the coast of Perth in Australia. Quite some distance from where that plane was supposed to be going. Mm-hmm. So basically it's done a hard left, and then just if it's there, it's done a hard left and just flown and flown and flown, and then maybe run out of fuel, maybe being crashed into the ocean, like in like the most remote, pretty much the most remote place this could happen. So something's going on, man. It's crazy. Maybe next week we'll know more, but this is going to be I keep thinking it's going to be something simple, and maybe it still will, but this is looking stranger and stranger. Stay tuned. Stay tuned to Brady's Plane Crash Corner here on Hello Internet.
That's exactly, yeah. I have a feeling like I would not want it to be, but I feel like you could make this a regular segment every week, talk about some plane crash or some interesting story from a plane crash. I feel that the depth of your love for this topic is quite deep.
At least we're not talking about freebooting anymore.
Yes, that's true. We're not talking about freebooting anymore. Although I do have a follow-up item about it, but probably not today. We'll save it for another time.
Okay. I tell you what.
What?
You stirred up a right hornet's nest in the last episode. With this language education.
Yes. I do know.
You knew it. You knew it was going to happen too, didn't you?
I did know that it was going to happen. And in addition to reading all of the Reddit comments, Derek of Veritasium is here in London, and he has taken some time out to see me. And I saw Derek earlier today and the day before, and I can say that he probably spent at least 8 hours of human effort, one-on-one, trying to convince me otherwise from my opinions about dropping language classes from the curriculum. And
you got off lightly. When Derek decides he's right about something, 8 hours is nothing.
Well, I think it's only because he had to fit me in between other appointments of things that he's doing while he's over here. Otherwise, I left Derek just a couple hours ago at the pub. I think he would still be sitting there now with me, trying to convince me if he hadn't had to go somewhere and we had to record this podcast. So he was very intense about it, and
he's obviously, if his opinion is different to yours, he's a big advocate of extensive language teaching in schools. Can you sort of summarize his position for us?
Right. The answer is I cannot summarize his position for us. And I kept mentioning this to him in the bar because he had actually a letter to me. He had written this whole thing on his iPhone that was like this like bullet pointed argument about all the ways in which I was wrong and all the ways in which I should reconsider my positions. And to be fair to Derek, I cannot, I think, possibly try to summarize his arguments without getting it just wrong or making him more infuriated, because with 8 hours, there's a lot of nuance that you can go into. We can suffice it to say that I was not moved by Derek. I have not changed my opinion.
In any way? There was nothing he said that made a dent anywhere? No chink in your armor?
Well, it's not chink in my armor, but there are a few interesting kind of things to bring up about that. I'm not summarizing Derek's argument, what I'm about to say. But I'm going to say a similar thing that came up on the Reddit and in some of the feedback that I got was comments about the benefits of learning languages, cognitive benefits that are not necessarily the language themselves, but things that you get from learning a second language. And I always want to be clear. I don't doubt that there are benefits to learning another language.
Yeah.
But my point was that I don't think the school system as it currently exists actually produces people who are able to speak another language. So you can talk to me as much as you want about the benefits of learning other languages, and I am all on board with that. But the current school system it doesn't do that. So it's sort of irrelevant how awesome it is to speak a second language when we're not coming out with kids who actually do speak other languages. So I would say that was part of the feedback that I got.
Yeah, but like you teach people sport and physical education, and they don't come out as athletes at the end. But the process of playing the game taught them not only did it have a health benefit, it taught them things about teamwork, it taught them things, it improved their coordination. It did lots of other things, even though they don't come out as a Major League Baseballer at the end. I mean,
Yes.
I know you realise this, but you seem to say, I realise this, and then completely ignore it.
I guess my thought on this is that the things that I have seen about the benefits of learning another language are presupposing basic competence in that language, right? When a person has basic competence in the language, here are the benefits that they also have. And so my position is just that I don't think most language courses have their students reach basic conversational competence to get those benefits. It's like a threshold effect. Anyway, I did want to mention that, but I also just again want to be clear because Derek will be really angry otherwise. That was not the soul of his argument, and he also had a very different language experience than I did. It sounded like he actually had quite a successful schooling experience in general, which by the way, language teachers, I think is a good idea, starting teaching French. I forget when he said, but in primary school, he was very young when they started doing French, which I think if you're going to teach language, you might as well start when kids are very young, right? If we're going to do this, let's do it right and start from the very beginning. But yeah, so he had a very different experience with me, and I am slightly exhausted but unmoved from our conversation.
You realize I've got Derek next. He's coming to me for 3 days now. We're like hanging out for ages. Am I just going to be bombarded with language stuff? Or
You may be. I do have a personal piece of advice for you and anyone else who sees Derek in the next couple of days. I have a major regret, which is that when I met Derek, we met in the Natural History Museum here in London. I gave Derek a hug to say hello, right? Like haven't seen you in a while, hug. And I really shouldn't have, because Derek was sick. But I thought, let me express my great friendship to Derek. Nice big hello hug.
Yeah.
And now I am feeling terrible. I am feeling very sick. Derek gave me a disease from physical proximity, I'm absolutely sure. He is now on his way to you, acting as a typhoid Mary of sorts, I assume. So you and the missus may be shortly experiencing symptoms of not feeling very well. So I do also apologize to listeners if my voice doesn't sound absolutely perfect, or if you hear the sound of like crinkly unwrapping like I'm doing now. I have Halls and a whole bunch of other medicines that I'm shoving into my face right now to try to sound a bit more normal. So I'm sorry, these sounds are terrible, but you're going to have to listen to them for the moment.
We're sharing a hot tub with Derek, so we're in for a world of pain. We're going to the spa, the hot spa in Bath.
Oh, that's not good. You are definitely disease vector Derek. That's what's going to happen to you. Sorry.
Can I share an email with you I got?
Oh, yes.
This is about language. Uh-huh. It's actually funny. There's a bit of a trend I've noticed since we've started the podcast, particularly the one we did about email.
Uh-huh. Are you getting more emails?
Yes, but it's really funny because I'm getting like short emails like you recommended. But because I think we've made our positions clear that you are pretty ruthless with email in terms of not reading it and deleting it. And I was a bit more of a softie, and I say that I sometimes read emails in case there's a gem in there. I'm getting all these emails that are kind of almost directed at you, or they're directed at both of us, and they're saying, I know Gray won't read my emails, but I know there's a chance you will, Brady, so can you tell Gray this, or can you make my argument for me? So
This is great. This is perfect. I like this system quite a lot. This way, you can filter out the interesting things. So, I think this should be a policy, right? For any and all feedback in email form, email Brady. He will read your message. I think this is great. I really like this. You are basically now a human Bayesian email filter for me for the feedback. So go ahead. Tell me, what is the interesting thing that made it through?
I haven't thought this through. If anyone decides that they're going to do that, I don't know. I mean, maybe No, don't email me.
You're still going to read them.
Anyway, I did get this email from a chap named Sean. I don't know if I should say his surname because he might like it being read out, but I'm always really reluctant to use people's surnames publicly.
Yeah. I'd say as a general policy, let's stick with first names.
Sean, you know who you are. You wrote a long email. It was very good. You made a lot of good points. Some I agree with, some I have no opinion on, but some I didn't make in our discussion. I mean, like most things in life, I have no really firm position on this whole language in school debate, but I try to put the other side because you put your side so strongly. And he made some really good points, and I'd like to share a couple of them with you. One of the points he made, you talked about in the last podcast how you think sort of machine translation is moving along so quickly that's one of the reasons speaking other languages will become sort of, a less important skill as time goes by. He politely but strongly disagreed with that, and it seems to be an area he knows quite a lot about. And he thinks we're 50, if not 100 years away from computerized language translation being really top notch, like reaching a level that is acceptable for strong purposes. I'll send you the email, and you can decide if you want to read it. He made a strong case for it. Yeah. So I just want to throw that in the mix. I don't know if he's right or not.
Yeah. My thought on that just very briefly is when I talked about the language translation, we discussed it a little bit last time, but my main thought about that is the scenario of utility. Right? Is it good enough for most people traveling in a foreign country to communicate with the people around them? I think that is the language scenario for most people. I imagine, especially if you are ever having to translate a work that has any kind of nuance to it, like if you're translating a novel between languages, I don't think machine translation is going to be able to do that kind of work for a very long time, because I think that's that is not a question of communication. Translating something that has style to it. Excuse me. I
blame Derek for that cough.
Yeah, I will blame Derek for that cough. What I was just going to say is I was reading a document a while ago talking about the beginning points of machine language translation, like how do you begin to train these algorithms? And I think to give you a sense of how dry and utilitarian the translations may be, is that the starting point for this one algorithm that I was reading about was the European Union corpus of laws, because for those of you who are aware, in the European Union, oh God, I should know this off the top of my head, but I think there's something like 22 or 24 different official languages. And what that means is that any document that is issued in the European Union has to have legal copies in all of the other languages.
Nice.
Which is, you can find these statistics for how many human hours is employed in this endeavor, which is quite a lot. For the record, I just want to say I'm totally okay with that, right? If you're going to designate something as an official language, you need to produce documents in that language. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
But basically, the result is that you end up having just this enormous treasure trove for computer linguistics of data, of thousands of documents that have been translated into this 20-something different languages. And so it's a great training ground. And by training, I mean algorithms are a little weird. You can actually sort of have them learn on their own. But the result means that like your translation style is going to sound probably as dry as a European Union legal memo is going to sound. So I don't think that we're going to have translations of poetry that are anything but laughable for quite a long time.
Well, if that's your brief response to that first
Oh,
of Sean's
God.
points, I'll limit the number of Sean's points I share with you.
Oh, I'm so
And I will
sorry.
point out I'm only briefly summarising. I'm not pointing out his whole argument.
Yes.
Another point he made that was very good though. You were saying you're an advocate of coding, computer programming as something that would be more valuable to teach in schools. He rightly points out computer languages change very quickly, become outdated very quickly. What languages are we what computer languages are we going to teach in school? Are people going to come out fluent in some code that is redundant before they even reach the job market?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting point. I actually discussed this with Derek a little bit tonight. In any future video or any future podcast that we talk about, I mean computer programming languages in a very, very broad way. I think there are lots of things if I was having a computer language course that I would teach that would not be straight up computer languages. So, for example, when I worked as a teacher, I taught a course in electronics, and that was a 100% hands-on practical course, no code at all. But what it was kids had to connect a bunch of sensors and buttons and switches to each other, and they had to make those connections using logic gates. So those are things like if the heat sensor is active and the light sensor is active, then make the buzzer sound. So I think any kind of teaching of logic to me falls under this category of what a computer programming language is. Just the very idea of how do you talk to computers. And so even though computer programmers in the audience, right, their head will explode when I put this in the same category, but I would be totally happy to have a lot done in, say, spreadsheets. There's an enormous amount of stuff you can do with a spreadsheet that is if, then, else, right? If this number is this, then do that thing. That's what I mean by computer programming, just the idea of teaching how to communicate with computers in a logical way. I just want to say that's a very, very broad definition. But to specifically answer his question about the language, I would just say that the languages in the field seem to turn over very slowly. There are languages that don't move very much. And
Okay.
For example, if you're using it's 2014, and if you're using an iPhone, those iPhones are still programmed basically in a variant of the language of C, which, oh God, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm going to say C is at least 1970s kind of old. So that's C is not a pretty language. I've programmed a little bit in C. Sorry, C programmers, it is just kind of ugly. Lisp is beautiful for those in the audience who are listening. And I do like Python. But anyway, you can pick languages that don't change very much, but much more with computer languages than with, say, human languages. The internal concepts, the logical gates of if, then, else, and, those things are universal in languages, and the syntactic differences between programming languages are not as large as you might think they are. So,
Let me read you something Sean wrote, which I quite liked.
Yeah.
And this sort of touches nicely on something you covered a few seconds ago. And maybe this also is where we come to the interesting point where sort of the robot grey versus the human me, but this really appealed to me. Maybe it won't appeal to you. This is what Sean wrote.
Yeah.
The selling point for teaching language for me is, as you alluded to in the podcast, the access point to culture. But I would include all human culture in that. More than anything else in our makeup, we are built to understand language. It is literally in our DNA. More than physics, math, almost anything else. Language is what distinguishes us evolutionarily from the rest of the animals and is deeply linked to our cognitive ability.
The second part of that is undeniably true. That humans are, especially little humans, are just language-absorbing machines. That's clearly built straight into our DNA. That's something that kids do. But I feel like I'd have to hear that first bit of it again. But I just because that's a thing that humans intrinsically are good at when they're young, I don't see that as a convincing argument for why we should teach it in this very formulaic way when they're older.
Well, let me
Right.
say that Sean also made the point that Derek made, which is that he thinks it's really important to start young.
Yeah, I totally agree with
Yeah. And maybe if we started young, we'd be less inclined to give it the flick later on. But something else he said, just because something may be poorly taught is not an excuse for it to not be taught. I mean, I think he's saying there that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah,
And if it's being taught poorly at school, don't ditch it. Just teach it better.
Yeah, I keep mentioning this conversation with Derek because it did go on for forever.
I'm wondering if this is it. I wonder if Sean is actually like, Derek trying to sneakily get to
maybe get more face time
alias.
with his points. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would just say that this cannot be the topic for today because it'll go on forever. But the language thing is very much connected with my opinions of how school in general works in a modern world, which, having seen it as a professional in that environment, is generally very poor. I think the whole education system has a whole lot of problems, and so I would leave it at that. That's like there are very many things that I would change about the education system, and I just think language is particularly ill-suited for the sit at a desk kind of learning method. But there are many things that are just done terribly as well in that system. But obviously, we still send kids to school. So,
all right, let's let it go. Let's let the language go.
I will. I have two final points though.
Go on.
Not arguing points, just a couple of quick things.
Yeah.
First, if I meant to mention it last time, I didn't mention it. If you are a person who does want to learn languages, there's a great little app that I played around with on the iPhone and on the iPad called Duolingo or Duolingo. Yeah. And I think that Duolingo is a good example of how a well done program can really accelerate learning in an area. So I just played around with it for a little while with my very rusty Spanish, and it's done really well. And I think if you had a dedicated student and you just gave them this one little app, they could make a lot of progress, way faster than they could just in a classroom on their own. So again, I'm not against language learning, and if you are trying to learn a language, I would recommend this app just for my little experience playing around with it. And the second thing is that going back to the emails, I have a little note here, which this again might make me sound like a total monster. But I did get one email about language feedback from someone.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to say about that email is it came on my screen and I was shocked by how long it was. You see the little scroll bar on the side?
Yeah.
And it was this like tiny little dot of a scroll bar. and it started right off like, dear CGP Grey, I have some points to make about language, whatever. And I scroll, and it's so long. And normally, I delete emails that are very long, but this was so long, it caught my attention.
Well, look, we found a new way through the CGP Grey shield.
Right. It was so long, it caught my attention just long enough to be able to do the keyboard command to pull up a word count, which was 1,600 words before I hit the delete button. Anything you've been up to lately?
I've been pretty busy.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this actually. Like today, a couple of hours ago, I was doing a few chores around the house. I'm just dropping that in to, make me sound like I don't just sit here and read Wikipedia. And I got a paper cut. That happens, doesn't it?
It's a real tragedy.
And I was thinking, and then something else happened, and 2 or 3 things happened in a short space of time that were frustrating me. And because I knew we were doing the podcast, I was thinking, I could talk about this or that. And then it made me realize, do people want to hear negative stuff in like podcasts and videos? Like if I'm unhappy or there's something that's annoying me, or I don't think people want to hear that. I think they want to hear stuff that's like constructive or interesting or like relevant, or things that are quite funny and positive, but I don't think they just want to hear moaning. Is there a market for moaning? I don't know. Do you hear podcasts that are just people being miserable?
I think people being miserable in interesting ways can be very interesting. It all depends on how a story is told. A story about the tragedy of your paper cut could be really great. Could be
No.
really enthralling. I would say this particular version of it was not. It was not super
No.
enthralling.
I didn't turn it into a ripping yarn, did I?
Yeah, he didn't really sell it. It was just a random event. How to put it? There isn't just value in positive stuff. There is definitely value in negative stuff, and I think particularly in as I did in many of the early episodes, in self-criticism. I think there is value to be had there because sometimes the person who is complaining or self-critical is aware of genuine flaws in the way that people who are endlessly optimistic maybe are not.
Yeah.
I think eternal optimism of the spotless mind is sort of by definition slightly deluded or unaware of lots of things. So I don't know if that exactly ties in with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But do you want to have like a spin-off show that is Brady Moans and we could...
not at all. I was just thinking like, you know, not in like a new age happy clappy type way because I'm not really like that, but I was thinking like, you know, you can start getting too negative sometimes. Like you can start seeing the negative in everything, and I don't know. I think it can be a problem, and for people like us who sort of work alone and you know, get lost in their own minds quite a lot. You know, like you say, I think like self-criticism and an awareness of problems is important, but you can get a bit negative sometimes, and I think it's important to realize that we've got a pretty good life. Things are pretty good.
Yeah. Again, this is the podcast of first world YouTuber problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I've seen a few people on the Reddit also pick up on, and
yeah,
but that kind of feedback is also, I've seen that go both ways, where some people are interested in first world YouTuber problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, it depends on how things are told, I think.
I went to Sheffield this week.
Yeah.
And did some sort of public speaking, a couple of talks about YouTube and about my work and things like that. I made sure I mentioned your videos as well, Gray. I don't just sit there and tell people how great my videos are. I always make sure I give a mention to other good videos. But I quite enjoy it. I quite enjoy going and giving talks. I don't know. It's something I like. Is it something you have much experience with?
Giving talks can be really good. I think I've sort of obliquely mentioned before that I used to have a sort of time management business before I got into the YouTube world, and I gave talks with that on occasion. And yeah, I think I really liked it.
I imagine you'd be a really good public speaker. You know, you got such a syrupy voice that everybody loves.
For public speaking, it was something I put a lot of practice into. And I can say that I definitely enjoyed it. And having been a teacher, it's something that I think you just get very used to talking in front of groups of people. It's obviously something that I haven't done in quite a while. But no, I could see doing something like that possibly in the future.
Well, maybe if this podcast thing doesn't work out, we could do some kind of, you know, some sort of show on the road.
Show. Yeah. Road show.
That'd be cool. I think that'd be good fun.
Yeah, we get a little caravan tour up and down this island.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is like completely unrelated to what we're talking about. It's completely out of left field.
Yeah.
But what we were saying did just remind me of it. And since we did this podcast, it's become a question I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
If it became feasible in this kind of, you know, future technology world that people sometimes talk about, to have your kind of consciousness taken out of your body and put into a computer or into the internet, and you could just be completely remote from your body and live virtually, does that appeal to you?
There are a lot of philosophical questions with that. I should say there are a lot of philosophical problems with that question.
Yeah, I don't want to turn it into a big discussion about it, and I know there's a film coming about it soon. And
is there?
Yeah, there's some. I think I saw a preview for some Johnny Depp film, and that's going to deal with that. And we could do a whole, and hopefully we will talk about it more. But just like on a gut level instinct.
Okay. Well, can I just mention that one of the philosophical issues with this, because I think this is, I try to be very consistent and very evidence-based in my thinking in my life. I don't know if listeners are aware of this, but that's a general philosophy that I have.
Yeah.
But there is one area of a kind of unknowable question that I'm very aware of, and it is the transporter on Star Trek. So my wife, she would not describe herself as a big Trekkie. I would say that she is a big Trekkie. And we watch Star Trek together sometimes. And whenever they go in the transporter, they beam down to the surface of the planet, I kind of assume that the crew members are dead every time that happens. And the creature that has appeared on the surface of the planet is an exact recreation of them as they were when they stepped in the transporter. But it's not the same person. Kirk gets into the transporter, and he's thinking about whatever, green aliens probably. And then when the transporter goes, that is the end of his existence.
Yeah.
And on the planet, there is a different living thing that finishes that thought about green aliens.
Okay.
Right? But how would you ever prove that it's a different Kirk? I don't think there is any way to ever prove that. Because, if you interrogated him, if you had all these questions, it's the same person from all external measures. But my guess would be that it's not a consistent consciousness, right? It's a different person who just thinks that they're the same person.
I don't know how you would prove it, but I'm imagining the method is going to somehow involve tagging of the particles, or it's going to somehow involve quantum entanglement or something like that. There's going to be a way to prove that, like, he's physically a different person. He's made from different molecules. I mean, that can be your only criteria. It can't be the configuration of the brainwaves and things like that.
Well, what we know from physics is that individual atoms are not different from each other. All hydrogen atoms are basically the same hydrogen atom. You can't exactly say that there's anything different about the individual atoms. And this also gets into some arguments about how does the transporter work in the first place, which I think are all irrelevant to the fundamental question, right? Does the transporter recreate the person from the energy on the surface of the planet, or is it actually sending their individual atoms in a stream, which I don't think is the official Star Trek explanation, but I'm not sure. Either way, I imagine if we had transporters now, there would be no way to prove it. And I can imagine that no matter how far science ever got, that maybe there just wouldn't ever be a way to demonstrate this conclusively.
You know how you were telling me you watched The People versus George Lucas and it made you feel uncomfortable because it made the people look really nerdy. Uh-huh. It's discussions like this that But I love it.
Okay, so and there have been episodes of Star Trek where they end up with duplicate people, which to me seems like clearly there's not the same. Anyway, this is all a roundabout way to say that if there was some kind of technology that existed to transfer my consciousness into a machine, I would always be hesitant to use it because I would personally think that this is actually the death of me and it is the creation of a thing that thinks that it is me. But there might not be any way to ever prove that. So I would, in future worlds that I hope exist soon, I am much more a fan of the ship of Theseus problem, where you slowly augment and slowly change over your physical being a piece at a time. And I think, okay, maybe I am more amenable to this idea of augmenting the brain slowly over time. And maybe this feels more like it's still me.
Like the person who says, my axe is 10 years old and I've changed the handle 3 times and the blade 4 times.
Yeah, is it the same axe? And it's the same kind of thing. Oh, my memory is getting a little bit bad, so we're going to put a chip in my brain, and slowly the brain becomes more chips than it is actually, squishy, delicate, fragile, organic matter. And is that still me at that point? I don't know.
I'm surprised. I thought you've given me hope in your humanity there.
I don't. If there was a way to know for sure that the consciousness transfer would not kill me, I would do it.
But how are you defining kill here? This seems like a wishy-washy definition of death, even.
This gets messy really quickly. I'm thinking of it as a continuous stream of consciousness But it's easy to poke holes in that kind of argument as well. Have you died every time you wake up in the morning? Because that wasn't a continuous stream of consciousness. So I'm not sure if it gives you hope, because again, I am first on the cyborg train with replacing any parts of my body that I can with superior mechanical ones. I mean, just without a doubt.
What would you replace first if I said you could replace something tomorrow?
Well, if we're not going to assume brain enhancements, which are obviously the way to go, because then they let you make better decisions about what parts to replace.
Right.
If we're going to assume that my brain is limited,
Okay.
the top two things on my list, I would replace my eyes. And that's partly because I have some visual problems with one of my eyes in particular. So already, right, like I have this sack of fluid in my face that isn't working perfectly. And so I would like to replace it. And I'm just waiting. And then the second thing I would replace would be my inner eardrums, because I have tinnitus in both ears. So I always hear a ringing sound all the time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's irritating, but it's not, certain people have it much worse than I do. I'm relatively lucky. Like right now, I don't hear it because I'm talking to you and there's stuff going on. So it's not as bad as it could be. But if I'm in a quiet room, there is no such thing for me. There is always a high-pitched ringing noise if a room gets too quiet. So I'd replace my ears then next on the list, and then that'd be the top priority. But everything, as soon as the machine is better, I mean, obviously you're just a fool to not upgrade to the newer, better model of whatever as soon as possible.
All right.
Just off topic. That's what you want to discuss.
It just was on my mind. Talking about current news and first world YouTube problems, I will talk about something that's been in current news, but in the context of being a YouTuber.
Yeah.
And that is two of my channels, Periodic Videos and 60 Symbols, which are like, as you know, are like chemistry and physics.
Yes.
They traditionally have been kind of my more newsy channels in terms of if something happens in the world, I'm able to react to it with those channels and, here's the latest news in chemistry and physics. And traditionally, I've done this very quickly, usually on the same day if possible. Like, I've always been able to quickly drive to the University of Nottingham where most of my collaborations are. And as you also know, I've recently left Nottingham.
Right.
I live about 2-3 hours drive from Nottingham now. So my filming there is more strategic and planned. And it has taken away my ability to make these fast reacting videos. And obviously this means absolutely nothing to you who does not make fast reacting videos. But it has been a change in my life. And I've been very frustrated by it just recently because of the announcement of the polarized light they've found in the cosmic microwave
yes, I heard
background.
About that.
Yeah, this kind of this new evidence of primordial gravitational waves. And it's very exciting, and I've been really keen to make a video about it. And I have finally done the interviews, and I would be editing the video now if we weren't talking at the moment. But it's been quite frustrating not being quite so close to all my experts anymore. First world YouTube problem. I no longer have instant access to world-class physicists. What a terrible thing has happened to me.
For shame.
Yeah.
Has it? So I faced this obviously a lot because of my terrible production cycle. Has it changed?
Yeah. By the time you make a video about it, the gravitational waves will have
Yeah, this is great. Sometimes the topics are so old that by the time I get around to them, everything has changed. And I think, boy, I'm glad I didn't do it the first way that time.
Yeah.
But has it changed any of the videos that you have done, or have you just not uploaded as consistently as you otherwise would have?
Oh no, I think it hasn't affected my production rate because I'm always behind. I've always got, I must have 20 to 30 videos that if I couldn't film again, I could probably make another 50 or 60 videos just on the material I'm sitting on at the moment and haven't got around to. So it hasn't slowed me down in that respect. But it does affect me when it comes to making very reactive videos, same day type videos.
Same day. That's amazing.
I know. The Nobel Prize was always a fun one because I would always sit there with them and listen to the Nobel Prize.
Those.
So we'd have a video up within 2 or 3 hours. And I guess my background in news journalism has made that seem a very simple thing for me. But now geographically. Anyway, just thought I'd share that because it's newsy and it's that kind of first world problem that no one will really sympathise with. But obviously, I get all these tweets and emails and messages now. When are you going to do a video about bicep and the gravitational waves? And the answer is, well, hopefully, if I start late, I might get it done. But then I've got Derek here, and I have to be a host, so it might not be till next week. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. That amount of time. Absolutely unbelievable.
I apologise.
Things are different when you can't react instantly. And I almost look at that as a kind of guiding principle for the way I make a lot of decisions about how I structure my life, is that I don't necessarily want to react to things immediately. And with the video topics that I choose, I'm almost kind of glad that my production cycle is so slow, because it forces me to pick topics that are going to be relevant for a long time. Timeless videos. I mean, that's a great thing about your videos, Yeah, and if I was able to make videos faster, I could see getting swept up into a much more following the news cycle system. And I mean, you are a former newsman, so obviously you love the news cycle. But for me, I feel like that's something I want to stay away from as much as possible. And it's the, I don't know if you've heard this phrase called a low information diet, which is consciously making decisions about limiting the number of inputs to your life. And this is something that I definitely consciously do, about trying to limit the number of sources of news that can come into my world. And I think it can be really beneficial to slow down the pace of things and to react on a longer time scale if you possibly can, because a lot of news that can come in is just not necessarily really relevant or actionable to you, but you can get caught up in a cycle of always staying on top of that stuff.
So you're not aware that Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin have broken up?
I am not aware of that, but can I tell you something? So before, when you said the thing about the gravitational waves, and I said, oh, I heard about that.
Yeah.
I said that because if he's listening now, I hope that for us a moment that made Derek absolutely furious, because when Derek came to visit me in London, that was one of the first things that we talked about.
Yeah.
And he said to me in a cafe, he said, oh, have you heard about the electromagnetic waves and the cosmic background radiation? And I said, no, I have not heard about this. And he was absolutely apoplectic about how I had not come across this piece of information and how it was the biggest scientific discovery of the year. And he was just horrified that I did not know. But from my perspective, we had a lovely conversation where Derek informed me all about this. And so now when you mention it, I can say, oh, yes, I have heard about that thing.
Well, now when someone tells you that Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow are broken up, you can say, I did hear about that.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. And this is one of the things about kind of, again, like I don't follow the news. I don't really read the news. That's very intentional. But it's impossible for big stuff not to find its way to you anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the great advantage, right? Like, oh, there's a huge scientific discovery. If it's really huge, I'm going to hear about it sooner or later, right? Or if there's a really big thing going on in the news that really matters, it's going to be impossible not to know. But the benefit of filtering out a whole bunch of the little minor stuff that doesn't matter is, I think, huge. You just don't occupy your mind with that stuff, and it doesn't take up your time.
Do you know who won the game between Manchester United and Manchester City on Tuesday night?
Oh, come on! I have no idea.
Do you know what?
I couldn't even tell you I don't even know what sport you're talking about. I'm sorry. Wait, I do know. Wait. Manchester United is football, right?
It is.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Soccer.
It's soccer. Yeah.
There we
go. That's
I envy you not being a slave to sport. Like, sport is... I'm really into cricket.
I have heard.
And when...
From you, many times.
Yeah. And recently, Australia have been playing some significant cricket series. They had a really big one in Australia against England that I was completely obsessed with. And as you know, there are these 5-day games and, a day lasts 8 hours, and so it's this epic thing. And because it was in Australia and I live in the UK, it was a really bad time for me. And I just couldn't sleep at night. I was sleeping with my iPhone under my pillow and naturally waking up every 10 minutes and checking the score. And it was obviously in my subconscious because I couldn't sleep. If I fell asleep, I would wake up 10 minutes later.
That's an addict. You're an addict there, man.
I know where you stand on addiction too. I'm already regretting telling you this now.
That is crazy.
I'm just so passionate about it. It matters so much to me. It affects my mood so much how Australia perform at cricket. This is making me sound worse. I want to stop now.
I'm glad I'm not married to you. Your mood is affected by the sports. Oh, man.
Dude, if that's the only reason you're glad you're not married to me, we got problems.
Yeah, but that'd be pretty high on the list,
Yeah.
If I was going to make a list of reasons not to marry Brady.
I don't think we'd be a good couple.
He gets grumpy if his sports team is losing.
This is common. I know you laugh like it's a funny little Brady thing. This is really common in the world that, like, particularly among men, that their mood is affected by the performance of sport teams they're passionate about. This is common, don't you?
I can understand that people get elated when their sports teams win and sad when their sports teams lose. That's the emotional drama of sports teams.
Okay.
Right? I guess that's why people follow them, partly. Yeah. But it sounds like you're just all a big grump around the house because your boys didn't pull out a win.
It won't be a long-term thing. Like if we lose, within half an hour or so, it's a forgotten thing. But
I even like that phrasing. If we lose, not if they lose. If we lose, I find that so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I do the same thing in other domains. I think that's a very natural, a human kind of thing to do is to associate.
Well, throw me a bone here. What's your domain? Let me laugh at you for a minute. What's something you become unreasonably passionate about?
No. I don't think there are things that I become unreasonable. Maybe you'd have to ask my wife about things I become unreasonably passionate about. From my perspective, I think, oh wow, I'm completely reasonable on all topics. But what I was going to say, the we thing is, I know because a student pointed it out to me once when I was teaching physics lessons. I would use the we when talking about scientific discoveries.
Yeah.
The sort of, we have discovered very many exoplanets in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I know most of the scientists I interview do that too.
Yeah, and I think I'm using that in this the collective humanities sense of the word, but it's the same thing as when someone says, "Oh, we've won the football," right? I have discovered no exoplanets, actual people who got PhDs and who know what they're doing and put in the hours and the work. They discovered exoplanets.
Those exoplanets are all automated now. It's not even humans doing it; it's computers. But that's another story.
But even then, that's not the we, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
An algorithm has discovered it. It's still not me in any sense. But that's the way I because I remember one of my students once said, "Who do you mean by we?" And I guess humanity as a whole is who I mean by we. But yeah, I didn't do anything at all about this, which I think. She might have been thinking, is he trying to take credit for this stuff? I don't think he did this.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously, I don't know. I consider myself Australian, and I've lived in the UK for a long time now. And it is a real bone of contention in my household with my other half because I support Australia in sport. She believes I should support England, but I don't. And I'm really, really... and it actually goes so far that I'm really, really anti-England because in sport, Australians are traditionally quite anti-England. So it's to a point where I will support against England, against all other countries, even if Australia has no involvement whatsoever.
Oh, and that's nice.
Well, I think an Australian will hear me say that and think, well, that's completely normal. If Wales beat England at rugby, that's brilliant. If anyone beats England at anything, it's brilliant to me. And it was a funny thing, actually. I was listening to a radio talk show recently, and they were talking about something where this became relevant, and they encouraged people to phone in. And I don't phone in radio talk shows, but because I really like this host, and I was driving along and about to stop for a drink anyway. It was I decided to call in, and they put me on the radio station. They put me on. They loved the producer liked what I was going to say, and they put me on, and I had a bit of banter, and I explained all of this. It was very good fun. Anyway, in this particular talk show, they had like a prize for the person who was the best caller, and they ended up choosing me. You know, Brady. That we're going to give Brady the vouchers, and because it was like a sports type radio show, the vouchers were like for a hardware store. So they sent me these £100 worth of vouchers for a hardware store, or £50, I can't remember. Anyway, they sent it to me. I was so pleased. Oh, that I won these hardware store vouchers. They were like this trophy that, you know, that was sent to me by my favorite like radio presenter. And the funny thing is, I'm so pleased with them. I refuse to spend the vouchers. Like, I keep them as like a little memento. I know you love mementos.
Yeah, it goes into the mausoleum of your house. Excellent.
Along with the expensive casino chip that I won at a Monte Carlo casino. And I was so proud that I won on roulette. I wanted to keep the chip as a souvenir and didn't cash it in. So the casino still got my money.
You're going to have a lot of these little trinkets around your house by the time you're 60. Yep.
Oh, well.
All around you.
I know, and you'll just be alone in a big, cold, white room.
So happy. Well, hopefully I'll have at least somewhat robotic parts by the time I'm 60, actually.
You will replace those liquid sacks.
Yeah, man, I'm really counting on that. I got looking at my watch here. Let's hurry this up, people. Get it on top of things.
What else is going on? Any news with you? I think that was supposed to be news in my life, and we talked about you being turned into a robot and Star Trek teleporting, and
yeah. If we're talking about first world YouTuber problems, I would say that I'm experiencing with my current video what I think is best described as a kind of lateness cascade.
How long has it been since your last video?
Oh God, I don't know if I want to know. Do I want to look it up? It has been too long. It has been too long.
Do you know what we should do?
You know what the terrible thing is? I can't actually remember off the top of my head what my last one was. Was it Jury Duty? Was that my last one?
Yeah. We should find out and like put it on Reddit or something. How many videos I've put out between your two videos?
God, no, I don't even want to know.
That could become like a new game. That
does not need to become a new game.
That would be really. I'm going to do that. I'm
going
to find out how many videos I've had since your last video.
Oh God, I wish I had not looked this up.
Is it the podcast? Has that become a distraction? Is that a time sink or not?
I would say no. And actually,
I guess you are moving house as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I want to just make a note about that. The podcasting, I think, feeds into potentially a future thing that would be worth a whole topic about different kinds of energy for different kinds of projects. But I can say basically that no, the podcast has not taken time away from the videos, because the videos are a very different sort of work.
Yeah.
But so this is what I would say is a lateness cascade. So I was working on a video. We'll call it topic A. And as I was going through it, I realized about halfway through, there's something interesting that I want to do with this. But I know that is going to take a lot of time to do, because I may need help from some other people to actually get it to work the way I want. But while I was working on that topic A, I realized, because of the move, I'm already kind of late and overdue for my next video. So I don't want to pick a big, huge topic to work on now. Let me switch to a short topic.
Yeah.
So I shelved video A and moved on to video B. This is about halfway, probably towards the beginning of March, actually.
Yeah.
And so my whole goal was to try and get this video done by the end of March, because there's something in particular that I want to do for April. But now it looks like, because of various things like the move, like Derek infecting me with his virus and taking up a whole bunch of my time today that I was supposed to be working on a video.
Preaching to you about languages.
Preaching to me about languages. And a few other things. And also just my own taking a long time, right? I'm not trying to blame this on external factors. Like, I'm slow with these videos sometimes, right? So it doesn't look like I'm going to make it for the end of March, because we are recording this, what is today? Today's the 25th, I think? 27th. Oh, my God. Okay, yeah, it's never going to happen. Today's the 27th. I was aiming for it to be on the 31st. So that obviously it's not going to happen. But so now here is the problem, and what I was realizing this morning when I thought, oh, God, this is just spiraling out of control. I think, there's a topic that I want to do in particular for April, topic C, that I also think will be relatively short and quick. So do I drop topic B that I've been working on for 3 or 4 weeks now at this point to switch to topic C to hit it for April? Because topic B doesn't matter what time it is, but topic C should happen in April if it's ever going to come out. And this is the kind of problem that I run into sometimes of just switching from one to the other when they're not fully complete. And this is a problem in my own workflow. And trust me, internet, I am constantly trying to improve my own workflow because nobody wants to upload more videos than me. However much you think you might want to see a new CGP Grey video, trust me, CGP Grey wants that video more than you do. There are some times when I have to make changes. Usually it's killing a project because I just realize that a video just isn't working for whatever reason. Usually it's just boring. I'll realize one day I'm bored by my own script. This is just not interesting. That's not a good sign when you're reading something and think, God, I don't even care. And I'm supposed to be the person who cares the most right now. This is a problem sometimes of trying to switch to something quicker. And I think that is a kind of decision that I should make less probably. And this, going back to computer talk for a second, I've been reading up on it's a thing called Scrum, which developers in the audience will know about. But it's a methodology for creating computer software, because computer software is it's not similar to writing, but it's in the same genre of things where it's a big project, it's a creative project, and it's very hard to put an estimate on how long it's going to take to actually make the thing to a particular standard. So there are lots of software methodologies that exist where people try to systematize the process of making something creative. And I've been looking into Scrum and a few others because part of their fundamental philosophy is about pre-committing to completion of certain tasks in a certain amount of time and disallowing changes in that until a certain amount of time has passed.
Right.
And I've been looking at that and thinking, I wonder, because I use people who follow me on Twitter know, I use a very heavy getting things done based system. But I've been frustrated with that in the past few years, and I'm trying to switch to something different. And so Scrum, and there's also a thing called Agile. There's a few software stuff that I'm looking at. But basically, I am also trying to improve my productive output. And I'm very systematic about that. And I think that this is something I'm going to move to try for a little bit to see if I can avoid this switching problem, which I'm fully well aware sometimes ends up in this kind of lateness cascade.
This is my thought.
Yeah.
And I'll preface it by saying your videos are very, very good, and they're better than my videos, and more people watch them. And that is because, you spend so much time on them. So I will never criticize you for spending a lot of time on your videos.
I'm feeling a big however or but coming.
However, but
yes.
I sometimes begin to wonder if you become so preoccupied with procedures and methods and putting all these things in place to increase your productivity that they actually affect your productivity. And if you spent less time thinking, how can I be more productive, and instead spent that time producing, you'd make more stuff.
Yeah, okay, so I can completely understand how it seems this way from the outside, but because it's something that I talk about, and you probably see me. I love to talk with other people about how they get work done. This is a perennial topic of conversation when I meet productive people.
Yeah.
But I think one of the keys to an effective system is it has to be very lightweight on a day-to-day basis. So on any particular day, I am not obsessed with how the system works and all of these various tricks. And I think that there's a term for that, which is productivity porn, right? That you are reading up about tips and tricks and all this kind of stuff, and it's like a kind of pornography, right? You're not doing anything.
Yeah.
You're just consuming this material. And I think there is definitely something to that. But no, in my day-to-day, it is not a driving thought. But as I mentioned in one of my videos, I do have a weekly review system. And that's when I think about this a lot. And
Well, even the weekly seems too much to me. Like,
yeah, but by weekly review, this is not more than a really 15-minute kind of think about how the work week went scenario. I'm not spending a whole morning pondering and looking into the clouds and thinking, oh, I wonder how I could be more productive. Let me watch these clouds float by and wait for thoughts to come into my mind, right? Which would obviously be just terrible.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're doing, I'm going to try this alpha beta test. I'm going to try using this for a week and see if it encrypt, and then I'll try that, and then I'll read about that, and it's time for me to completely review the system. Just make the video, man. I want to watch a video.
Okay, let's talk about the thing that I put off later. Let's discuss it now, which is the amount of energy. So all productive systems have a kind of bottleneck in them somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? There's going to be some point that is the slow point that you can't speed up no matter how much you try.
Yeah.
And for me, that is the writing part of it. That's the bottleneck. Everybody always thinks it is the animation that takes a really long time. That's not the killer. It is the writing that takes a long time. But it takes a long time because, at least in my experience, I can't sit down and just write, say, for 8 hours in a row, because there's a diminishing returns on improving the script. And I definitely know there have been days where I overwork a script and I can see that, like, oh boy, the last 2 revisions today are worse than when I started. I should have just stopped an hour ago because I've actually made it worse than the beginning was. So the slowness has a lot to do with the writing. It doesn't have a lot to do with just straight up animation or other problems that can happen with the video production. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is this is sometimes difficult to talk about, but I even heard myself saying it in the I think the 3rd episode when we were discussing work-life balance.
Yeah.
It's very easy to talk about a lack of time because I think that's a socially acceptable construct. Right? Nobody's going to argue if you say, like, oh, I'm too busy to do something.
Yeah.
Right? But time is not the resource that is really of question. It is about, I wish I had a better word for it, but it really is about energy management. And you have certain amounts of energy for certain kinds of projects.
It's almost like concentration.
Yeah, I think concentration is a good way to put it, because there's just a ton of very interesting research about particularly willpower and people's ability to make decisions. And I mean, you can plot that stuff on a graph to show how this is basically like a battery that starts off strong and runs down low as the day goes on.
Because I can spend an hour editing at certain times and get loads done, and spend an hour editing at other times and the same thing and not do it as well. And that's just a concentration thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's like how concentrated is your how intensity is another word for it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And so this is where I'm very aware of my particularly good writing times for putting the scripts together. But I would say on a really great day, I have probably about 4 hours tops of very high quality writing. Now, that just means writing. I do spend other time doing research and other administrative stuff. But after 4 straight hours on a single script, there's just nothing that's going to happen. It's like used up for the day. And I try, and I'm when I talk about messing around with productivity systems, I have various ways that I'm trying to figure out how to get more quality writing time out of a day. And I have not successfully done that at this point.
No, this is so, I've got to respect it, and I've got to respect you. And, your scripts are very well written, but they're short and your videos are short. And it is hard for me with my background in newspapers and television to comprehend that you spend so much time writing them. When I come from a world where, I would go out and spend my day meeting people and interviewing people and making phone calls and finding stuff out. And the writing is almost just the blast you do at the end for 20 minutes before deadline to get the thing done. And I know a newspaper story that I would write is not as well crafted as one of your scripts.
Yeah, but let's I mean, I'll be totally fair here, right? Let's say you spend 20 well, let's make the numbers easy here, right? Let's say you spend 1 hour on a newspaper article, and let's say I spend 100 hours on a script. My script is not 100 times better than your newspaper article.
All right,
right?
no, I wrote some pretty bad ones in my days, but hopefully
but
not.
You see what I mean? Like it doesn't scale linearly with hours input. And I'm very aware of that, and that's also a place where I think I have to be aware of actually constraining possibly the writing time and saying, look, that's part of why I was looking at Scrum. But I actually had it on my list here because I know you're a newspaper man. What is your advice about writing faster, or how did you write so quickly?
Well, I guess you had to. There was no choice. You had to write quickly because you had to send it to the people at this time so that it could be printed onto the paper and delivered to people to read over breakfast in the morning. And there was just no choice. There was no, you talk about changing your mind and deciding, actually, I'm not going to do that one, or, external factors. That just was not an option.
Right.
You would be fired if you took that attitude in newspapers. And I think that just teaches you, it just teaches you to write whether you're in the mood or feel the inspiration or you're particularly happy with what you did. And that's why, so many newspaper reporters become authors, because they have that discipline to write and finish writing and do the job, whereas other people who don't have that background but quite fancy becoming an author will quite often just spend forever, going back over chapter 1 and improving it, or deciding this is no good and I want to start again. Newspaper journalists don't think like that.
I will just to interject for a second, because I want to make sure we hit this point. I will just say that I completely agree with you about the waiting until you feel like it. I come across this as well from people sometimes who want to be inspired when they write, and I know that I'm not writing like a newspaper person, but that is my experience as well. Is you got to train your brain. Okay, look, you're just writing in the morning, and it doesn't matter if you don't feel like it, and that definitely works. I think a younger version of myself who was way more foolish and tried to write, I mean, this is like 10 years ago, tried to write things, was waiting around to feel inspired. And that is just a loser's game, right? You're never going to get anything done that way, right? Morning times are writing times. And that's just the end of it, brain. I'm sorry. You're going to have to do this now. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you should go work for a newspaper for a few years.
I would never do that.
No.
I would never work for a newspaper.
I think you'd enjoy it. I think
I would not.
Working for a newspaper, I think, is a brilliant experience. You learn so much about so much. Everyone wants to be on TV and work in TV. And then I used to work in TV, and people would say, "How can I do it?" And I always would say to them, the best thing you can do is go and work for a newspaper. And people in TV who employ new journalists want to take them from newspapers because you learn so much, and it's a real baptism of fire. But they're also a bit rubbish.
Well, yeah, but that's a separate issue. But so for you, the main thing about writing quickly was just that the deadline existed, and you would be fired if you didn't hand in.
Yeah,
something.
and you learn to maybe you learn to let go, and maybe that's because you don't have to put videos on YouTube. You find it hard to let go.
Yeah, I mean there is, as we've discussed before, there is an implicit deadline of a monthly cycle. Not hitting a monthly cycle is not the best.
But even there, you say not the best.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not getting fired from YouTube for not turning in my numbers. Although I do know at YouTube they do keep track of these kind of things, and I've gotten comments sometimes from the inside of YouTube about, oh, we see you didn't upload anything this October. So it's being kept track of, which is a little funny sometimes. Like,
maybe they're just worried that something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like send someone around to knock on the door and make sure you're okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe they're just worried about advertising revenue.
Yeah, I think that's probably their primary concern.
Okay.
I was going to say the only other thing, which just talking about my routine, and one of the reasons why this might be a little slower is that many of the times, it's fine. I didn't really think about this until now, but we were talking earlier about how I used to give talks, and when I was a trainee teacher and I was trying to prepare for lessons, and I got caught doing this a couple of times, which was a little embarrassing. I would give a lesson to an empty room in the school before giving a lesson to an actual classroom full of kids. So I would get up in front and just teach as though this was the way I was going to do it, sort of time it for handing out stuff, and then, okay, what am I going to talk about here? And how is all the rest of this? And presentations, when I was doing it for my time management business, it's the same kind of thing. I did the presentation sort of over and over again. And I guess when I'm doing the writing for the script, because I know it's going to be a YouTube video, ideally I want to be in a place where I can talk the script out loud. And so I'll set up my laptop somewhere where I can stand up, like I'm going to be when I'm recording, and I do the whole thing out loud. I'm talking it out as I go through the whole script. And so I'm trying to think of it as, how is this going to be said in an actual video? And maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm very slow with writing. Maybe it's a different kind of process. But it doesn't change the fact that I definitely do want to make more videos more quickly. But the writing is by far and away the bottleneck for me, and I am always thinking about ways to try and squeeze more out without having the quality go down. But so far not greatly successful on that.
I am, as always, astonished by how different you and I are. It is like we are from different planets sometimes.
It is.
Like, I would never, rehearse a talk or a presentation or something. I'll just kind of...
What about that talk I saw you do? Did you rehearse that one?
No.
See, that I don't understand at all. You can't get up and just... Well, I mean, obviously you did, and you did it great. But I couldn't get up and give a talk spontaneously in front of a large group of people. I would have to rehearse that a lot.
Obviously, in that case, I had slides, so I knew the order of things, and I knew the points I wanted to hit, and it was just the slide itself was like my bullet point. It's a picture of that. That means I'm going to talk about this. But I think about it. I do most of my thinking in the shower, so I have quite long showers, and which gets me in a lot of trouble. But so I do think about it, and I'll think, I want to do this, and I want to say that, and this is where I want to take it. But I would never rehearse it or pretend to do it. It's amazing. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you give a good presentation, so I cannot argue with your method. But
thank you. And I'm not, maybe they would be better, or if I rehearsed. But
yeah, but this is the same problem, right? If you rehearsed for 10 hours, would they be 10 times better? Probably not. right? So this is a question of marginal utility, of how much additional time do you want to sink into something before it doesn't make any sense to do so. And so that's one of the reasons. Again, just going back, that's one of my thoughts about consciously reducing the amount of time that I spend on writing the scripts to see if that has an effect. But yeah. Anyway,
I should say, like we didn't plan to talk about this at all. Obviously,
no, we did not.
And I know some of these topics are like super close to your heart.
They are.
So I think we need to say for the record, this is not the last word. And there's more to be said on this. And I know you would, being someone who likes to prepare, I'm sure one day you'd like to prepare and have a few more points about this. So although I know we've kind of stumbled over it, and you're going to probably agonize now and think, I should have said this and that.
I am going to agonize like you wouldn't believe. I'm going to have to hold on. Let me see if I can pull this up here, because where's my review? So we did stumble upon this, and okay, here we go. So I have been, again, I understand why it sounds like, or from your perspective, it sounds like I'm always changing stuff up, and I'm always tinkering around the edges. But part of it is I've been having this feeling over the last 2 years, really since I've been self-employed, that the very robust system that I made for myself as a teacher, that worked like just a great machine and was beautiful, has not served me as well in my self-employed time, and been trying to figure this out. And I have been working on, this is in quotes, a review of the book Getting Things Done. It's called Getting Things Done 10 years later, because I've been using the system for a decade now. But my book review, in quotes, is now 2,200 words of basically my experience with this system, and how I have found over time it has been less and less effective for me in this new role where I'm doing script writing. And so this is like a big thing in my life that I'm trying to work out by writing down, because writing is a kind of thinking and getting it out and saying, okay, where are the issues here? How can I get a new system set up? But it really is, from my perspective, it is a very slow, very deliberate process. I'm not always making changes all the time and switching the system up. So anyway, someday that review will be published, hopefully soon, on my website. And that at the very least will be a much more clear, thought through record of my experiences with this topic. So
we'll get there. I'm sure this will come up on multiple occasions.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
I know there've been some listeners to the podcast who don't really like it when we don't have a set topic that we discuss, and it's a bit meandering.
Mm-hmm.
So I apologize to those people for this podcast, because they're clearly not going to like this one. We were normally we have we do follow up, and then we have what's going on, and then we kind of try and ease into a topic, but we didn't get to the topic side of things, which is actually probably a good thing, because we hadn't decided on a topic.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. This is, again, we hadn't decided on a topic. It was really my responsibility to come up with something to talk about, and I failed on that very, very spectacularly. So
our topic was going to be not having topics. So we'll have to save the topic of not having a topic for a future episode.
Yeah, maybe we will. I was looking over my desperate list and trying to come up with something. But yeah, maybe not having topic is a topic for the future. There's something we do have to mention though before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Which was the ending from the previous podcast.
Yes.
Which I have to give full credit was your genius idea to just cut it off there. And that seemed to go down very well. People enjoyed the very abrupt ending.
Well, actually, it's interesting you should say that, because there's something very important that I'd like to say about that.
Yes.
That's where you should cut.
No! I can't do it again, man. No, I'm not. I did it once. I'm not going to do this a second time.
Well, how are you gonna end this one then?
Because on the first one, when I say, "Oh, I had something I wanted to say about that," I really did have something that I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, but if you tell people now, like that, it has to be like, you know, all right, tell them, you tell them. Fine.
Now you're having me doubt myself.
I tell you what, though, it better be good. Go on. What were you going to say? What was the thing you wanted to say about ending the podcast? That's so good. Come on. I hope it's well written.
This is terrible. No, I don't have anything that's really wrong.
What were you going to say? I actually do want to know now.
No, but now you're just humoring me.
No. Just tell me anyway, even if you cut this off. Tell me.
Okay. The thing that I was going to say is that I too am aware of the abruptness of the ending, and all I was going to say was to say I would really like a little ending jingle sound, the same way we have opening jingle sounds, but I have never found anything that I find perfectly acceptable. And so I was just going to say that if in the comment section, if we have any audio engineers among the listeners, that if they wanted to try to come up with a little ending sound, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I would definitely be interested to hear what people have.
But not a song or a jingle.
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah, not a song, but just some sort of little sound, because it has to be quick, right? Like the podcast is over now, and just some sort of audio marker that it's over, in the same way there's an audio marker when the advertising starts. But
yeah.
But now this feels just terribly. It feels like a terribly flat.
No, you've thrown it out there. You've thrown it out there.
No,
but we're not going to have that sound for this podcast, so this one is just going to have to end hard.